let's call it a meeting to order. Let's all stand for a moment of silence. Councilman Shadrow, if you lead in the pledge. I pledge allegiance
to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Danielle, would you call the roll, please?
Mayor Pressgraves.
Here.
Mr. Vickers.
Yes.
Mr. Daltonmeyer.
Yes.
Mr. Shadrow.
Here.
Mr. Lancaster.
Yes.
Mr. Sowers.
Here.
Ms. Pence.
Here.
Continuity in government of Luray, Virginia. This meeting of the town council is being held pursuant to the April 13th, 2020 ordinance of continuity in the government of Luray. The town clerk shall read the names of the council members present and identify those who are electronically present. The town manager is responsible for receiving public comments in advance of the meeting, which may be submitted by mail, email, phone, or hand delivered by 5 p.m. on the day of the meeting. In-person attendance and comments by the public is also permitted, subject to the limitations of the most recent executive order and phasing guidelines issued by Governor Northam. This meeting can be viewed live on the town's Facebook page, and a recording will be available to the town's YouTube channel. Minutes from the meeting will be posted on the town's website after being approved by the town council. Okay, I think everyone has your consent agenda in front of you.
All right, Mayor, I'd like to move to approve the following consent agenda. The minutes of the regular council meeting on September 14th, 2020. The minutes of the council work session meeting September 22nd, 2020. And the accounts payable checks totaling $213,100.91.
Have a motion?
Second.
Question? Danielle, would you call the roll, please?
Mr. Shadrow.
Yes.
Mr. Lancaster.
Yes.
Mr. Sowers.
Yes.
Ms. Pence.
Yes.
Mr. Vickers.
Yes.
Mr. Dalton.
Yes.
Okay, presentation. Down to Luray Downtown Division. Mr. Vickers, welcome.
Hey, council.
Hey.
How are you guys?
Good.
It's been a while since I've done my monthly check-in with you guys, so I just have two quick little pieces of business I wanted to share. First, at the last meeting, you mentioned the bronze windows and the current sunflower paint, and the request was made for us to see if that was something we were willing to change up for the holidays. I have found a local high school student who is willing to do a little updated holiday and support local message on those windows with your blessing.
Absolutely.
Awesome. I would estimate a time frame there in about the next 2 to 3 weeks for completion. She'll submit a drawing to me for approval. I'll get her going. So exciting. The other thing is that if you haven't already heard, LDI is hosting a drive-through dinner party. Usually in the fall, every year we all get together and celebrate downtown and celebrate small business. But since we are not able to gather together, we want to give you guys still an opportunity to celebrate at home with your loved ones. So the dinner party will take place on October 25th, which is a Sunday. You RSVP to me, and you will drive through and pick up your meal made by Main Street Bakery, your dessert made by Miss Lynette Schenk at the Valley Court. And it will also include a little bit of table decor, because the decor at our parties is always so fun, and also a split of champagne. So you can toast to small business in Luray. I hope you guys will join us and pick a time slot and see me hand out dinners on the side of the road. I've done a lot of things downtown, but handing out meals on the street is not one, but we'll check that off the list.
Always in arena.
Anything else I can do for you guys?
Thank you, Mary. John says in his comment period, Mrs. Stevenson, if you come up and state your name and address, if you would.
My name is Margaret Stevenson. I live at 101 Pass Run Drive, Luray, which is in Oatmeal Acres subdivision. So, very seldom do I hear people take the time to thank public officials for all the work that you've done. So I want to thank Mayor Presgraves and all the town council members, especially Mr. Lancaster for his 30-plus years on the town council. So thank you all. So many people don't know who you are. So I want to say thank you.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you.
Mr. Mayor, I've got some of the emailed comments to read into the record as well.
That's what's on there.
Yes, sir. First comment is from Kathy Herbert, 201 Hawksville Heights Drive. In 2015 and 2016, an exciting initiative was introduced, Vision Luray. It was enthusiastically received by business owners who lent their time and expertise to developing what should have provided a strategic plan for business development and maintaining and improving quality of life for town residents. The town council, which should have played a leadership role in using this document as a framework for a strategic plan, did not follow up. There was no coordinated effort to create a synergy of activity among the town, chamber, LDI, and other organizations to follow up. I asked the town council members who were in office in 2015 for an explanation of why there was no follow-up. It is disappointing to now hear the same comments about the need for business development, complaints about empty storefronts, unhappiness that young people leave Luray because there are no jobs and nothing to do. What can you salvage from this earlier framework to move forward with specifics, as in what is step 1, step 2, step 3? It is time to solve these problems and not just reiterate how hard they are to solve. I am asking that this issue be placed on an agenda for development of a plan of action. The next comment comes from Bonnie Snyder, 312 2nd Street. The town of Luray does not need this equality resolution. We are a town much larger, much like any other. I agree with many of opinions of the candidates expressed Thursday night. Jason Pettit stated it well when he said that no town is perfect and there was discrimination to a degree in every town. We are a flawed society and will always be flawed, but we need to look for our similarities instead of magnifying our differences. And to that point, Joy Sauer's comment was appropriate in saying that we need to continue to apply the golden rule, and he suggested we are moving in that direction. That informs me that we are going in the right direction. Jerry Doffelmeier stated that racism does not impact all in our community, but does impact some, and we must look to what degree they are impacted and what might be needed in Luray to show some correction. I don't believe this resolution nor any such resolution would help with any correction. This resolution is beyond what is needed in Luray. It would only cause division through its attempted application and could prove to hamstring the efficiency of our Luray police force. It seems that this resolution goes far beyond the point of any assistance to unity and places requirements on our town that are basically undefinable. The eventual language of the resolution in the multi-opinionated atmosphere of today's society would be offensive in some way to just about everyone on every side. We would be expending too much of our time and energy in definition of words and language rather than actionable decisions. Language that seems adequate for one would be offensive for another and extreme to even another. Too much of the town's energy and finances would be wasted unnecessarily with a resolution that has no capacity for success. We do not need an equality resolution. We in Luray are not plagued with systematic racism, to use the leftist terminology elicited by Leah Pence. Inflammatory labels like misogynistic, homophobic, and other negative buzzwords, as used by Ms. Pence, only show that some of the council do not understand or know the town that they claim to serve or intend to serve. Ms. Pence's language demonstrates that in not knowing Luray, her solutions would not be unifying but would be divisive. Instead of examining the resolution further, we need instead to abandon it. It, in large part, is unwarranted, and adopting it would be futile. Many of those on council or candidates for council spoke of the need for economic development. Luray needs a town council that is working towards bringing industry back to Luray to make us a thriving community once again. Tourism does not have the capacity to bring back the lost revenue, the lost jobs, nor the lost community we once had when industries like Wallace, the textile, the tannery, and a large Wrangler were operating. While we don't expect to see a revival of those industries, we do expect real solutions to employment in the town and county. Parents used to have their adult children's families living within the same county because Luray's industries provided a good living for parents and subsequent generations. That has not been the case for decades. This is a serious ongoing problem for the town that needs actionable decisions, not the distraction of an equality resolution. If the council intends to proceed with this resolution, I suggest that the citizens hear studies or reports from our Luray police force that profile a need in the town for such a resolution. Due diligence would suggest that we should have supportive evidence in this avenue, and a quality resolution is to be taken. And a comprehensive report from the Sheriff's Department as well would be indicated if we are to find relevance in this. In any event, either the need for qualifying evidence or for the decision to discard the resolution, it would appear the more prudent course of action would be to table the resolution until the election is over and a new council is on board. With a new mayor to be elected and 3 seats on the council to be filled, the citizens are well aware of the imminent election, and our attentions are focused on those issues rather than on writing emails about resolutions that the town will be able to handle once the election is concluded. The next comment is from Ms. Audrey Tutt-Smith, 116 Cole Street. I strongly recommend that this resolution pass as it is, or with added stronger language regarding the targets of discrimination. I see this as a commitment from the town officials to actually do something about discrimination within our communities. Training, open discussion, and town hall meetings should also occur on a regular basis. The next comment is from Melvin Tutt, 113 Mead Street. I hope you had a great holiday weekend with family and friends. This message is in response to the town notice and request for citizen input. My comments and suggestions regarding the resolution on equality are as follows. This feedback comes from the life experience of being raised here, raised by my family who suffered and survived segregation, separate but equal, and many events since then of inequality here in our hometown of Luray. These events still exist today. Over 30 years of service to the U.S. government as a subordinate, supervisor, leader, and manager of both military and civilians, nationally as well as internationally, has taught me the value of embracing diversity and inclusion in all areas, to be an objective thinker and maintain situational awareness of the current environment as well as my own implicit bias. A recent example of implicit bias impacting decision making was during the 22 September work session at 8:38 minutes into the meeting. While discussing the resolution, Councilmember Vickers said, I am a little bit afraid of what we're agreeing to. I don't know what I'm afraid of, but it's something. Also, to Ron's credit, he did sound off in favor of getting public input from your minority community or any other community. The language of the resolution in review should only be enhanced, not abated, decreased, with the exception of common being removed from common council. During the 22 September session, a point of disagreement seemed to center on the point that the resolution should only move forward if it is a combining document or has something binding to. In other words, it has to state exactly what we, the council, must fulfill the resolution. There also seems to be confusion as to the necessity of this resolution. Other comments, this resolution amounts to nothing without something, a motion or action attached to it. It should not be adopted as is. I strongly disagree. This resolution will break the chain of inaction that follows events of discrimination within our town. The council regarding what will come after passing the resolution is in this position. We don't know what we don't know. However, the resolution is simply your promise to us, the citizens, that you will move forward in a constructive direction while vowing that you will not remain static or still when faced with incidents of discrimination and inequality. Once passed, the real work begins for formal training and encouragement of open communication. Town employees and officials need a common knowledge base. Proper education and recurring training are essential to establishing this baseline, moving forward in a positive direction with continuous improvement. Please keep in mind that the town should not start from scratch. Finding established guidance, reach out to other successful municipalities and agencies within the federal government, such as the U.S. Armed Forces and federal employee programs. This resolution is a commitment, a promise from the town of Luray that the governing body will no longer be passive nor complacent regarding equal protection and equality for town citizens. Thank you for your attention and consideration. Excuse me. The two recommended changes that Mr. Tuck puts forward in the third paragraph, the town proclaims that discriminations of all type, no matter its base, including discrimination based upon race, creed, color, religion, national origin, sexual orientation, age, with the addition of sex, including pregnancy and gender identity, political affiliation, marital status, disability, genetic information, age, retaliation, parental status, or military service have no place in this town. In addition, after the fifth paragraph, another paragraph would be added. The town proclaims that it will dedicate resources towards and promptly implement a human relations-centric training program for all Town of Luray employees and officials with an emphasis on diversity and inclusion. The frequency of training will be of a recurring nature, such as initial or orientation, followed by annual refresher training. Excuse me. The final comment came from Jody Johnson, 5398 Harbor Court Drive, Alexandria, Virginia. Luray is at its best when everyone has a chance to meet their full potential, which means equality of opportunity for all persons. By adopting a formal equality policy, Luray should be showing a commitment to fair and balanced practices and promoting cohesion within the community. Confronting and working to eliminate discrimination, whether by reason of age, gender reassignment, sexual orientation, marital status, or civil partnership race, nationality, ethnicity, religion or belief, ability or disability, and encouraging equal opportunities can help present Luray as a leader in the area for equality, which leads to growth. I strongly urge the committee members to consider adopting a town equality statement that will promote Luray as a place that is diverse and inclusive and that shuns discrimination of any form. Show that Luray is a strong, cohesive community with fair political leadership. As someone who was born and raised in Luray, I want what is best for the community and continue to recommend Luray as a lovely tourist place where all people will be welcomed and treated fairly. For those community members and council members opposed to an equality resolution, please let the community know what groups of people specifically you believe do not deserve equality. That's all I have, Mr. Mayor.
All right, let's move into the action and discussion items. Subdivision request, Steve?
Yes, sir. The subdivision request was discussed at your work session in September. It is a request for the parcel on First Street identified as parcel 42A11 1840-17. The request is to divide the lot into two lots so that it can be developed for future duplex development. The Planning Commission reviewed the application at their September 16th meeting and unanimously recommended approval of the preliminary and final plat for the subdivision. And staff have no further comment about the application.
That's in R4, right?
Yes, sir.
Okay, Council, in your court.
Mayor, I move that the town council approve the preliminary and final plat application to subdivide parcel tax map number 42A11-1A-40-17 into 2 lots as presented.
Have a motion?
I'll second that.
Second, discussion? And the other two call the roll, please.
Mr. Lancaster?
Yes.
Mr. Sowers?
Yes.
Ms. Pence?
Yes.
Mr. Vickers?
Yes.
Mr. Blackmore?
Yes.
Mr. Tyler?
Yes. Resolution on citizen equality.
Yes, sir. Again, this was the item that was discussed at your last work session. The resolution as presented to y'all has basically removed any of the specific groups because a number of the comments that were received and included in your packet were identifying groups that they felt had not been included in the original draft of the resolution. So the language has been modified to simply identify that residents shall be free and safe from all wrongful discrimination of all types, so that it can be as inclusive of any type of discrimination as is deemed appropriate.
This is the one that you rewrote, Joey?
I think so, where I put those 2 comments in there. Yeah, I mean, one of the citizen comments to me illustrated is, I mean, if we could put everybody in there, I mean, but I noticed it doesn't, we haven't spoken of things like someone of lower intelligence. We haven't spoken of things of socioeconomic status. I mean, there's so many litany of reasons. I mean, and I mentioned last time that I wanted to rewrite something, and I wanted to, but I wanted to not be the sole author of it, and I had a hard time finding somebody that wanted to help me with that. But the idea being, let's just treat everybody with love and respect, regardless of who they are and what their situation is. Let's just treat everybody the way we want to be treated, and that, you know, it's none of it's perfect, and never will be. But that's why I removed it. Just put for any immutable quality, and yeah, that wasn't it.
Joey, can I ask, can you go to the next page so everybody can see what the resolution is? Is that it?
Yes,
Well,
sir.
I agree with what Joey is. Anytime we make a list, I'm afraid I'm gonna leave somebody out. And but I listened to what everybody said too. The thing I think we might be missing is we're not saying what we're going to do. We don't have a goal. And I know this is hard to talk about, but could we add something to it on this after we do this resolution that we commit to having like further meetings, further talks? We could say we're going to have a town hall in the new year that we can continue the discussion, because as it's written like this, I agree with it, but I will be sensitive to other people's concerns. Yeah, my fears have been abated somewhat because all this discussion has made discussion. People have talked about it. Groups have gotten together. It's been written about. And one person was seen to be talking about, we don't need anything, we're good like we are. Well, I don't agree with that. There's racism in this town ever since I've been here. But I don't think it's huge, but then I'm not the one being discriminated against. So, you know, it's hard. I've been doing soul searching. So I think that when we say all citizens, for everything, we include everything. We're saying we want to do the right thing. So I'm in agreement with this. And if we're in discussion of it, I'd be interested in what anybody else thinks about it before we vote on it.
We had 14 people in total provide comments. Several were not read to you. We had 11 on this paper that was handed to us. 14 in favor. Almost all of them said the language should be specific, and they gave different categories. One was against. At the last meeting that this came up, the comment was made that perhaps the language should be changed because religion doesn't always support all sexual orientations. And that is true. Religion doesn't, but the law does. And as elected officials, as government, it is important to listen to citizens who took the time to write in, who have shown up tonight, who have asked to be named in their protected categories. And at a certain point, you delete and dilute a document where it doesn't have any real meaning. And I think
the act of really loving thy neighbor is listening and making sure that they're feeling heard and including them in statements. And at this council last meeting, you said you wanted citizens' comments. But yet, this document was rewritten before we had all of the citizen comments. And this document wasn't reposted on the town Facebook page. So my concern is that we are diluting a document instead of adding to it, which is what we should have done, making sure all the classes were protected and stated. We diluted it.
Is there an exhaustive list though? And so what, let me ask you, just, and it's an honest question, like honest question, like, is it important to add a protected class to the list? And if so, why? I guess is my first question.
Yeah, so the way it was written and presented to us was literally verbatim from the one that passed in Stevens City.
Mm-hmm.
And council pointed out that there was, legal counsel, pointed out that there was an issue with one word. And then several citizens pointed out that there were issues, and I pointed out that the word gender was left out, which is an issue in our community. And several pointed out other things that we hadn't thought of, which is great, such as those with mental impairments. I think it would be very easy for us as a group and combined with the citizens to come up with a pretty exhaustive list. And I think it's rightful that they should be named, because the issue has been is that we don't want to name and we don't want to talk about it. And we have to make some steps in the right direction.
Okay, well, I think that we're making a step in the right direction by coming up with some type of resolution at this time and place, because the hurtful feelings that people have had, and the strong emotions people have had, it's the right time. It's always the right time to get rid of discrimination. It's never the wrong time. And to the best of what I've been thinking about and people I've talked to, that this statement that we see up here does include everybody when it says all people. It's maybe too concise or too short for some people, but as soon as I start listing all the different possibilities, I know I'm going to leave somebody out. And I don't want to do that. I don't want to leave anybody out. I want to address concerns of the people, the loudest voices for sure, but I don't want to overemphasize one group over another one, I guess. I don't know what I'm saying here, except that I like what I read, and I'm going to stick with it.
I think the one thing I would encourage you to think about is, we the people hasn't always been we, right?
Oh, I agree.
And we specifically named protected, we have amendments that were added to the Constitution to provide we the people to be inclusive of we. We named categories, we named protections for people, and we continue to do it to this day as our government continues to change and grow. And it is one thing to feel like you belong to the group of people in power, who hold power. And there's another thing to be named in that group. There's power in words. And it is important that it isn't just immutable characteristics. It's putting name, carries weight, it has meaning. And I don't expect us to be perfect, and I don't think citizens expect us to be perfect. But they expect us to try to make an inclusive list. And I think the last document had some really solid foundation, with just a little bit of tweaking, and again, this document has a lot of specifics we could add in. And then let's put that up for input to see if we've missed anyone. And then let's bring it back to the table next month. And to your second question, which I think is very valid, right? It can't just be something that we say. We have to put meaning behind it. And again, I'm gonna ask you all again to please put on the agenda the discussion for diversity and inclusion training. I have asked you all several times. It is needed. I hope you're saying it's needed. This is one, then that can be step 2, and then who knows what step 3 and 4 will be. But I'm happy that we're making progress. I'm happy that we're coming along. But if you go from the first draft to this is the second, it's not forward, it's back.
I think I'm getting mixed signals from you, Leah, because the last time the document came up, was it Kathy Herbert and yourself? You were pushing, let's get it done now, let's vote now. And now I'm hearing, let's put it on the table, let's talk about it some more. So I'm getting a little bit confused to what you want me to do.
So the reason last time I urged you to vote it is because you didn't see the need.
I don't believe that. I don't agree with that.
Okay, I felt like most people didn't see the need. I feel like now everybody sees the need. And now what I'm hearing is that you want it to be inclusive. And if you want it to be inclusive, then let's do that. Let's make it inclusive. But let's not make it inclusive by just using one sentence that doesn't list what we're trying to address. Don't wash it, don't dilute it where it doesn't have meaning.
When this all started, correct me if I'm wrong, this came out of racial tensions in our community, right? So why did we not just stick with race?
Because,
I mean, if I'm being honest, because if you start listing more and more and more, that's not inclusive, that's exclusive by definition. To list 5 things, does that then imply that we can discriminate people or treat people poorly for any other reasons? Because that's the premise of, if you're leaving someone off the list, then you're leaving them out. Well, but then doesn't that mean that these are the only reasons we won't discriminate against people for it?
well,
I mean, just the logic of it is it's really difficult to me. Like, I don't think we should be racist. I don't think we should be sexist. I'm going to treat you the way I want to be treated, whatever it is, sexual orientation, gender, socioeconomic status. I'm going to treat you the way I would want to be treated if I mean, to me, that's more to the point, isn't it? It's like, I don't know. I mean,
you can look at the words of the citizens,
I don't know.
right? They're saying expand the language to include these things. They're not saying let's rewrite it to be a broad stroke. They're saying keep it specific and expand it. And that's what I'm listening, that's what I'm hearing, that's what I think we should do.
Anybody else got any opinions, or what do you want to do with it?
Well, for a few years, this council has voted every year, for many years, whatever state laws are sent to us, we vote to either accept them or refuse them, and we've accepted the state law as long as I've been on the council. And anything that you can put in here that would be legal is gonna be part of the state law. So I don't see why we need to rewrite something that's already been written. Or to even say that we'll enforce it. Well, we've been enforcing it, as far as I'm concerned, we've been enforcing it forever. Now, some people don't feel that way, I know that. Well, I don't. Anyway.
Anybody else?
Well, how about if, we can do it one or two ways, in my mind. We can adopt this tonight, the first step, the way it's drafted, and then perhaps, Leah, are you willing to head up a group to come back with a more detailed, resolution for a future meeting then?
I'd be happy to. And Jerry Dolphmeyer, would you be willing to also serve on that?
Of course.
Okay, thank you, sir.
So we could go ahead and adopt this tonight to show that we're gonna take the first step with it. And if you guys wanna come back at a subsequent meeting after input from whomever you think would be appropriate to get that input from, including the authors of the emails that we received on this, then I wouldn't have a problem with looking at a more detailed resolution at a future meeting. That sounds like a reasonable compromise. I'll put that in form of a motion.
And I'll second.
Motion is second, discussion. Would you call the roll, please?
Mr. Vickers?
Yes.
Mr. Bachmeyer?
Yes.
Mr. Schreiber?
Yes.
Mr. Lancaster?
Yes.
Mr. Sowers?
Yes.
Ms. Pence? Yes.
Code amendment changes, 2-54, under order of business.
Yes, sir. At our last work session, we had discussed a draft of an ordinance amendment that would codify how the meeting agenda should be established, as well as what the order of the meeting agenda items should be. This would provide general direction to both staff as well as council and your appointed boards as to how items would progress to get added to an agenda, as well as establish the ability for town council to add or delete agenda items at the beginning of your future meetings.
Gentlemen, looking at some of the agendas from other towns, some of the things that I noticed that other towns had was one of the items that would be constantly on the agenda would be a category of unfinished items. So things sometimes that we talk about, but then they don't always get brought up at the next meeting. But they were not things we've decided, but we have to circle back to them.
Old business.
That'd be old business. Yeah.
Well,
That's on.
but it's more like items for that were not. It's like, do you have an update, and if not, it just kind of stays on the agenda. Or is that what we're using our old business for, you believe?
That's what we usually do. I mean, I think.
Okay. I guess I'm just saying, like, it's not normally a category that we see, like, even on our item tonight, it's not under there as something that's constantly on there, and all the unfinished items that we're currently working on in the background are listed.
And when you say that, you're talking more like tabled items, really, in a sense, right, where they still were in front of us every month, even though we're not even gonna talk about it tonight. I assume that's what you mean, right? Or maybe we will.
Yeah, maybe we will, but it's more like things that we know we're gonna circle back to at a future date, but we're not talking about it tonight.
Yes.
Like, we do have some items like that,
But-
from time to time.
Yeah.
And then another thing,
Steve, put a hand up, I don't.
oh, yeah, sorry, go ahead.
Well, in response to that, typically if there is an agenda item that council is tabling or postponing, you're required to put in a specific date to circle back to it. Like when we, at the September meeting, we tabled action on the resolution until the next meeting with the expectation to get public input. Usually, I understand where you're coming from about items that are forthcoming, but typically, once an item is presented to the body, y'all have to specify when you will be getting back to that item.
Like, for an example, like the Browns building, like, the last meeting it came up, and we talked about we would be doing some things, but we know we need to talk about it again. So, just kind of like a ongoing list of things that we know we need to circle back to and address. And Steve, you're just saying that those things would only appear on an agenda with a future date, when we have a future date.
When we have actionable information to present to y'all, yes, ma'am.
So,
If we had items of discussion, I mean, the old business, unfinished business that we had on an agenda, unless we had an action item that had been deferred or tabled to a future meeting, the old business would catch like general discussion items that we
I have discussed
didn't finish.
previously, yes, sir.
So there are kind of two categories there. One would be actionable items that we didn't take action on, and we deferred to a date specific or table. And the others would be general items that we really hadn't had on the agenda for specific action, but we could continue on the old business.
yeah, I think it's just sometimes hard to keep track of, like, what do we still need to circle back to, and I feel like at some places we've sort of, it's like, oh yeah, we need to talk about that, and we'll go 3 or 4 months and it's dropped off. I know it hasn't dropped off your radar, because this is full time for you. But for us, sometimes I feel like it's like, oh yeah, I wanted to do X, Y, and Z before we talk about that. And if I keep it on something that says, hey, we're circling back to this in the next quarter or the next year, then it stays present. And then the other thing I noticed is that other agendas will have council comments, or council announcements, excuse me, as well as mayor's announcements.
Should we have some sort of timeline to submit these agenda requests? I mean, we can't do it like a 4:45 today, but that's, so, I mean, I think we need, I don't know, a week, 10 days, something like that.
Unofficial,
That might
well,
be too long. Is there a
Tip-
guideline on that, or?
well, typically, we start going to press with our agendas Wednesday afternoon. So the current, if you get an item in before noon on Wednesday is when we can add it. And that's simply because it takes staff a good bit of time to assemble all of the items, copy all of the items, and then put them out, so.
I think there should be a deadline for, if two council members are gonna place something on an agenda outside of the meeting, then I think it should be a deadline for them to get to the town manager and get it on the agenda. Otherwise, I mean, you're not gonna have a meaningful discussion on it if the staff hasn't had ample time to give us the background that we need. And ideally, it would be better to have all the agenda advertised to the public so that the public knows what is gonna be on the agenda, rather than for us to change it at the meeting. And if the public hadn't seen that, they would say, wow, I wish I'd have known they were gonna discuss that, and they showing up and I had something to say.
So once it shows up on there, that doesn't give other council members much time to
Correct,
investigate
exactly.
the thing anyway.
So I think
It
outside.
ought to be a week or so ahead of time.
Would you not say Wednesday noon, like he's saying that we need before that, or would that be soon enough? I think. 'Cause then-
Is that soon enough for you guys usually?
Typically, yes, sir.
So then you could tell us what other people want to put on the agenda, so we can be briefed on it also.
And
Yes,
we'll,
sir.
and we'll know, and we'll have, it'll be on the agenda then, and we'll know it when it comes out, when the
Okay.
draft agenda comes out.
Wednesday noon sounds good to me on that. Do we need to modify it before we make that into a motion?
You don't make changes, yes.
All right, well,
Are you all okay with adding the council announcements as well as the mayor's announcements?
I don't feel like that I have ever been held back from speaking. I don't know if I need a category that says, it's your turn to talk.
I mean, I guess that might go against the idea of setting an agenda and giving council the ability to add an agenda item. If council's gonna say something, there must be some reason you're saying something. I mean,
Well, if you
unless
were-
it's just like, I just really want you to know this about me personally. It's
Well, yeah, let me give you a few
No,
examples.
business.
So you serve on LDI. Do you still do that? Okay. So let's say you have like an LDI announcement, no offense, that Meredith wasn't here or something like that. But sometimes like you know something and you're like, oh, hey guys, don't forget the LDI event, something, and hopefully with time moving forward, like we will be working more and more with citizens or other groups, and we might have individual announcements to make about the community. Not personal, but
No, yeah,
business
that's fair.
related.
And that's generally the way they're used.
Yeah.
It's not for a business item. Any council member has an announcement, like if fire department's doing something, you want to announce it, or whatever the case might be, you can do it.
I think the mayor's discretion is here. I've never felt like Barry had kept me from stating my opinion. So I don't think we need to add things to the agenda just for the sake of adding them.
Well, they're not for the sake of adding them, they're to make sure that we all have equal time.
So
to say-
some of us feel like we don't get a chance to talk, is that what you're saying?
Yes, and it's also important just have to have a place where council can make announcements, as Jerry just talked about, and we've seen Joey do in the past, and those types of things. It's common on other agendas.
It is.
I'm fine with that.
Thank you.
I don't.
That was it, those are the only two things that I had that I found on other agendas that I thought I'd bring up.
So now we need a motion?
Well, we have to understand what we're going to change.
Oh, okay.
We're going to change the count to, and so I guess under items requested by two or more council members, which may include written requests from residents, all such requests must be submitted to the town manager by noon on the Wednesday prior to the council meeting. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
And then after mayor's announcements, we would include, council member comments.
So that'd be number 10.
And then in terms of that ongoing list, Jerry, where do you normally find something?
I would think if we just start putting old business, if we have a category for old business, I mean, right now our agendas don't have old business.
Yeah.
We kind of change it to action and discussion items, but it used to be new business, old business. If we just wanted to add an old business, words suggested here in the draft.
Yeah, that'd be great, yeah.
And then it's just more how you use it, if you have
Yeah.
simple bullet points of, oh, by the way, here's some reminders.
And then go in there before the town attorney's report.
Steve, does that make sense to you?
My only concern with that would be that people looking at your agenda might think that you might be considering taking action of any item that's listed as old business or recurring. I understand where you're I think if there is a concern on council that we have a list of ongoing items, I think we could include that in the manager's weekly report, just so that, again, we can go however you'd like, but my concern would be if I saw Brown's building on the agenda, I might think that you're taking action to sell, demolish, some type of action because we don't, we have limited space on the agenda that we publish. And
Would it be possible, just as how you do number 5, general citizens comments, and then it says parentheses, other than agenda items, parentheses, would it be possible under old business to just put parentheses, items not discussed this evening? Or items not being voted on, because it might be possible.
Items not for action.
What's that?
Discussion not for action.
Discussion not for action, yeah.
Something like that.
I mean, I don't want to get it too complicated for you.
well, and again, I don't know at what and I apologize for not understanding or not being able to put my hands around this. What would be the qualifying? What would be the threshold to qualify an item to be added to that list?
So I'll give you an example of something. So at one point we had talked about tenant merchants licenses. And we were going to circle back to that conversation, and then I had followed up with you, and you had talked to Jason and figured it out that there was like a legal thing, but we didn't necessarily as a whole council get that update. And there's nothing, I wanted to be very clear, I am not upset with you or saying that you did something wrong, so just so we're on the same page. But then also like the Browns building or things that we have talked about in the past that we know that we still have to do something on that aren't necessarily active, but they're active within, they're still active within what we're doing, what we're working on, and they're coming before us. So for example, like light poles that Brian had mentioned, that's not something we're going to be able to make a decision on or talk about within the next calendar year. It's not within our budget, so that doesn't need to be on there. But things that we're actively working on, we're actively engaged in. What it helps is if you don't happen to see this agenda, right, and you're a citizen, but you're like, well, I wonder if they've talked about Browns or is Browns still on their list, then it says, yeah, it's still here, it's still something active. At some point they're going to talk about this. Does that make sense?
It does, but again, I'd hate to clutter an agenda because if you're looking at Browns, you're looking at this, you're looking at that. I understand where you're coming from, but I think that should be a separate list than just, outside items on an agenda. I think, I would hope that there's a better way that we could maintain an inactive, active list, if that makes sense.
Yeah, we've got so many things going on, I don't think we can make a list of all those every time. We need to have a separate list of active and inactive, well, that might be a better idea, but I don't think we can junk up the agenda.
I remember back to when Mr. Black was manager. He would send us, once a week an update, things we need to keep in mind to know about You've been doing that. I think this is where that stuff belongs.
And I would prefer if we would just simply have an inactive list in the manager's report. That way, if there is some item, that way you'll keep it fresh in your mind. And if two of y'all want to say, oh, well, let's bring this item back, at least there's a list of items so that y'all can pull from that if you ever want to have an item added to the agenda or a work session for discussion.
If it's not an action item and just discussion, it should be on the work session.
Yeah.
And I understand where you're coming from, but I really think it would be better serving to council to have a separate list rather than to have an ongoing list of items that we haven't addressed.
And then that works for our end. How does it work for the citizen end?
The citizens can simply contact council staff and say, what about this? Because
Well,
that's...
Would it make more sense? What I'm trying to do is I'm trying to open up communication, make it really easy. So if adding things to that old business makes it hard for you, then that's not what I want to do. But what I don't want to do is make it hard for citizens. So I'm just trying to find a way to make it, like, is there maybe just a single document, like, you know how we do our documents of things on the town website where you can go to get documents? Maybe there's just documents of old business. I don't know. I mean, we don't have to solve this now because it doesn't, like, in our meeting agenda, you know, we're not changing that. It's already on old business. We're not asking to vote on that tonight. So I think we could table this discussion for, you know, a work session in terms of that nitty gritty of how to get that information across. But
Well, and I think simply having a list of items that we've not taken action on would still create a question in a citizen's mind that they should contact staff or council of, okay, I see that there's a list on grounds building. What are you doing on it? Because that list won't be, again, without having a paragraph or a dissertation as what the discussion has been, what we're looking at doing. I think.
Yeah, I see where you're coming from, Steve. I think somewhere where we're keeping a list of ongoing open items, and if we keep the old business on the meeting agenda, it gives us option to put something under old business if we want.
And again, I think that's where I'm coming from. If there's a list for council,
Yeah.
anytime that y'all want to
Yeah.
bring it back, I completely understand that. But I don't think that simply a list of every item that we haven't taken action on would answer questions
It's gonna make the-
on the part of citizens.
gentlemen, would you be okay if we just tabled this discussion for a work session? Because what I'm hearing from citizens is they don't find out that we're talking about something until that Wednesday before we talk about it. There's not enough time to, like, write a letter or get themselves organized or their thoughts about it by the time we actually talk about it. So I'm just trying to open that process up, but we don't need to delay this tonight. What we're voting on tonight, we've already talked about, and that old business is already on there. We can talk about what that looks like for the work session, if you're okay with that.
I'm fine.
Okay.
So, are we going back to Mr. Shiro's amendment to the motion about adding was that one thing we agreed on, the Wednesday before?
Yes.
We second that?
Well, we don't need a motion now, do we?
If we're doing that part, we are.
Yeah, we still need to.
Yeah,
We still need to adopt this?
So I'd call for the vote on that.
Well, but there were two things. One was the,
Item 10.
and then the council member comment section after mayor's comment.
So are both included in your amendment to the motion?
Yes.
Then I'd second that, Nancy second.
Does everybody move yet?
Jerry did.
I'm
You-
Didn't I? Okay.
No.
Oh, did I?
I was coming, but then I had to say.
That's gonna be.
Go ahead and make one.
Okay. All right, Mayor, I move that we approve the code amendment to chapter 2-54 order of business as presented, with the exception of two additions. Number one being following number 9, mayor's comments, that we add council member comments. Sorry, mayor announcement.
Why don't you go before that?
And, I'm sorry,
Why don't you should put that before that?
before your before the mayor's comment?
Yeah.
Okay. Now, we amended that number 9 becomes council member comments, Number 10 becomes mayor's comments. And then under B4, items requested by 2 or more council members, which may include written requests from residents. I would add that such requests shall be made to the town manager by noon on Wednesday, prior to the, as council meeting.
I'll second motion, second discussion. And then, did you get that motion?
Sure you did.
I'm so right. We'll write it for you later. Mr. Dahlmeyer.
Yes.
Mr. Sauer.
Yes.
Mr. Lancaster.
Yes.
Mr. Sauer.
Yes.
Ms. Pence. Yes. Mr. Vickers.
Yes.
Okay, CARES Act, town business grant, Mr. Burke.
Yes, sir. Again, at your September work session, we discussed establishing a grant program for our local businesses. There is a draft of the business grant application as well as the parameters for the program. It would establish a grant up to $2,500 for small businesses, $500 for nonprofit businesses, and $250 for home-based businesses that have been affected by COVID-19. And staff would recommend establishing $25,000 to establish that grant, and if demand warrants, we can come back at a future date.
Okay, Council, what do you want to do?
I think it's a job well done by the staff. I move the town council approve the $25,000 from the town's allocated CARES Act funding to establish the COVID-19 small business grant as presented.
Before it's seconded, we had talked about, I had asked before if we could possibly add utilities to that list. There's a lot of, the Virginia State and other local grants are adding utilities. So it's for PPE, cleaning and sanitizing expenses, facility improvements, rent, and business mortgage. But we also added utilities.
I'll have to defer to Jason because it's I was under the understanding that utilities were specifically excluded under the CARES Act.
I think they can be included for the purposes of a grant given to a business
Okay.
for economic assistance.
Gentlemen, would you be okay if we added that?
Yeah, absolutely.
What's the motion now?
Well, did you want to say something else, Jerry?
Yeah, I think we ought to put an email address on there that they can submit it to, if they submit it via email, because if you're doing it by mail, I mean, look at the time frame we have, it's already mid-October.
Okay.
And we should put on there who it should be directed to. It doesn't, I guess it wouldn't have to say who is the ultimate who's gonna be making the final determination, but it should definitely say like where it should be directed. And I would do email, if I were you, I would want that.
Yes, sir.
And let's see, any deadlines like we talked about. As an aside, I would be inclined to put a deadline, or even if it's a false deadline, you can still give yourself a little wiggle room thereafter.
It'd be great to have an early deadline because, as you know, Steve mentioned, we can refund it or we can add more money
Yeah.
if this gets depleted.
Yeah, like that's what I meant by false deadline. Like something where it's early, so people are like, all right, I better do this week instead of.
I would suggest October 31 then,
Okay.
because the only opportunity for council to add additional funding would be at your November meeting.
Yeah, wouldn't it?
Okay.
What do you all think?
Agree.
Fine with me, yeah.
All right.
I say we need a motion.
Okay. So do we
Okay,
need to
got a motion?
do we need to redo the motion based upon adding this thing?
She's got.
I don't think the motion is specific.
Oh, I need a second.
Second,
Discussion? Okay, now you call the roll.
Mr. Sauer.
Yes.
Mr. Lancaster.
Yeah.
Mr. Sowers.
Yes.
Ms. Pence. Yes. Mr. Vickers.
Yes.
Mr. Dahlmeyer.
Yes.
CARES Act, marketing, Steve, let's do it now.
Yes, sir. Another item that we had discussed as CARES reimbursable would be providing funding towards the Chamber and Luray Downtown Initiative to develop an advertising and marketing program that Luray and its downtown are open and safe to visit. In discussion with LDI as well as Chamber representatives, we had originally talked about a $10,000 effort. The Chamber and LDI requested that we consider funding it at a $15,000 effort. That way it will further allow them to work with current marketing firms that they are working with to expand on a marketing plan that will be specific to both Luray and our downtown, trying to let people know that we are back open and safe to visit.
So it's $15,000 for each entity?
$7,500 for each entity.
Say that.
Yes, sir.
It's not 1,500 to the chamber to use?
Well, it would be to $7,500 to both, and then LDI will provide the funding to the chamber for a total of $15,000.
Total White 64, got it. Okay, thank you.
But this is not a co-op program, right? Each entity is doing their own marketing, and you're doing yours, and the chamber's doing yours, or you're all combining?
We're gonna come,
Yes.
if I can answer, we're gonna combine efforts.
Okay.
Because as Steve mentioned, there's a marketing firm in place. It's sort of a two-pronged approach. We'll do an early message with new, creative, or a new image, to give you the marketing term, a new creative will be published by them. Hopefully you guys will get a chance to kind of take a look at that before it's put out to the public, but an early message will go out, and then a little bit later message. So making that jump from 10 to 15 will allow us to do sort of that two-pronged approach with an entirely new creative from White 64 to PR firm.
Thank you. That's good. All right, I move that the town council approve $15,000 of the town's allocated CARES Act funding, with $7,500 to the Chamber of Commerce and $7,500 to the Luray Downtown Initiative, to develop a marketing program to advertise Luray and its downtown as open and safe to visit as presented.
Second.
Motion second, discussion. And we have to call the roll.
Mr. Lancaster. Mr. Sowers.
Yes.
Ms. Pence.
Yes.
Mr. Vickers.
Yes.
Mr. Dolphin.
Yes.
Mr. Taylor.
Yes. CARES Act Fire and Rescue COVID-19 expense.
Yes, sir. Again, staff would recommend council consider a donation up to $5,000 to both the Luray Fire Department and to the Luray Rescue Squad, to allow them to cover COVID-related expenses that each of those entities has incurred during this pandemic.
I move that the town council approve the reimbursement of up to $5,000 in COVID-19 expenses to each of the Luray Fire Department and the Luray Rescue Squad as presented.
I have a motion,
A second.
discussion. And now would you call the roll, please?
Mr. Sowers.
Yes.
Ms. Pence.
Yes.
Mr. Vickers.
Yes.
Mr. Dolphin.
Yes.
Mr. Sowers.
Yes.
Mr. Lancaster.
CARES Act hazardous pay.
Yes, sir. Council had requested the ability to offer hazard duty pay to the staff that have been continuing to interact with those that were potentially COVID, I don't want to say contaminated. Exposed, thank you. As such, staff have developed a program that would dedicate about $71,500 of our CARES Act allocation at a rate of $2,500 for our police officers, $1,750 for our water and wastewater plant operators, and $1,500 towards our public works, parks and rec, and administrative staff. Myself, assistant town manager, the town treasurer, and the chief would be not eligible for this award.
Steve, I just have a question. That breakdown of that 71.5,
Yes, ma'am.
is that somewhere?
I can get it for you. Effectively, it's basically all of the full-time officers. It's just all the full-time staff times whatever the allocation would be, adds up to about $71,500. It's a little bit less. I think it's $71,300, but I can provide that to council if you'd like.
I was just wondering why there were just the three categories that were outlined, why those were specifically outlined and not the others. Was there a reason behind that?
I'm sorry, what?
The 2,500 police, 1,750
Well,
operator.
in consultation with the town attorney, we have to, the allocation for hazard pay has to be based upon the exposure rating. Our police officers have the greatest potential for exposure as a group, and would thus warrant a higher hazard pay allocation. And then,
Sorry, you're not understanding the question.
Those three categories cover all the employees. There would be
Yeah.
any employees left.
No, but just hear me out, like, it says 71,500, and then these numbers don't add up clearly to that.
It's per employee.
Per employee.
Per employee. Thank you. That's all I needed.
Oh, sorry.
Now it totally makes sense. Is that just, it wasn't said per employee anywhere, so it's like, where's the difference of the discrepancy of the number? But thank you, now I understand.
I had a comment. I'd like to see us do more if we can. I mean, I had a conversation with Steve about it. Did I understand you correctly, Steve? I mean, I don't wanna, so far we spent about we're committed for about 500,000.
Yes, sir.
And we will receive 850,000.
We've been allocated 850. The county has removed 40 to 50 to cover the Page County Rescue Squad's expenses. So 800 is about what we anticipate being available to the town. Yes, sir.
So we still have $300,000.
Yes, sir.
If we don't, and again, I'm not saying we're throwing money. I'm saying that you have to understand if we don't spend this or obligate to spend this by the end of December, we lose it.
Yes, sir.
And I think this is a good opportunity for us to give something to the employees that's not coming out of our local tax dollars, and it won't be reoccurring. And I think that if we could bump it up, I think this is a good opportunity to acknowledge. I mean, all of our employees, particularly our police officers who were out there during the COVID pandemic and still are out there. I think that if we could allocate additional money, I'll throw it out on the table. I wouldn't mind doubling this for all categories.
So if it's doubled, then it's 150,000, still a good bit of money that needs to be decided upon.
Well, the one thing that might be a good idea to delay, and I think it's a great idea, would be to delay that second half, would be that we do have the opportunity to offset expenses directly related to our police department budget expenses with this, which would mean that we could then have flexibility in the new year to either use it for what you're suggesting right now, or if another need arises, more targeted need, we could use those funds in a different manner in the new year.
And the one,
So just
But we have to use them this year, though.
but it
This
can
program, I
be
know what you're talking
allocated,
about.
if I'm understanding correctly, and then Jason, that's correct, right, we can allocate the funds to offset expenses in our police department.
But then that goes into the general fund. There's no guarantee that we're gonna.
That is the problem with it, if there's no guarantee that if we don't do it,
If we don't do it now, there's no guarantee
I know.
after January 1
that
that
we will actually, in
you're
fact, do
gonna
it.
have a different council.
Well, that's a good point too.
And
Fair point, but.
yeah, one of the other things I want us to be really mindful of is, we should look at food security issues within our community. We haven't given any funds, to help with that, and we know that we had a 14% unemployment rate in April. It's much better now, however, we do know that massive layoffs are coming in November in our community, because we are a tourist-based economy. I do think that we should look at some CARES Act funding to help with, some of our food programs that are already established or in need. So if we could just keep that in mind for a future conversation.
Well, if we double this, you're still gonna have $150,000.
And we also should probably keep in mind town business grants might need
Two.
funding.
You have like
Well, we
230
still
left,
got,
right?
we still got 130,000 from the town business.
Right.
if we need it.
I'm not opposed to it, I'm just saying, let's
Yeah.
reevaluate when we get all the.
And I don't have a problem with giving more to those categories as well. I just say, I think it's foolish if we
I'm with
give
you.
it back.
Yeah.
It's just,
So, Jerry, if you doubled 71,500, it'd be 143,000?
well, I don't know, did you guys include FICA and that stuff? Is that gonna impact?
No, the bonus amount would then have whatever deductions for tax and whatnot would be reduced. So whatever one-time hazard pay council elects to adopt the employee would not realize that full amount, because yes, sir, there would be FICA and all the other. Yes, sir.
Let me be honest, like, my one issue with that is this funding really is to help a community that's hurting during coronavirus time, and our businesses have been very adversely impacted. I know they've received some funding from here and there, but I want to make sure that we have enough funds that we can allocate, not just $25,000. Honestly, as I've said before, I'd be fine if we put absolutely no cap on it. And if that money is still as of use and our staff is determining that these businesses really need it, and that we're actually going to keep our businesses going and alive and strong, I'm fine making it whatever that number ends up being.
Yeah, or if we get the feedback that it's not helpful and it would be more helpful if it was X, Y, or
If it was
Z, then we
double.
have the funds to do that.
I mean, because we have a business community, and I know the businesses I'm working with are very similar to what's happening here. And I mean, yes, some of them are doing good. In October, we've seen the boom. We've all seen the boom. We've seen Main Street on the weekends, but come November, it's going to be a very different situation. Going into December for a lot of these businesses, it's going to be some real pain and some lean months. I want to make sure, even if we proceed with what you're suggesting, that we are really using the funds in the way that they're intended to be able to keep our community strong through the coronavirus.
Why don't we give them this part now and make a final decision like on December 1st? Because there may another need may rise up that's greater than what giving all that money at one time. I mean, you don't give all the hay in the barn to one cow. Spread it out a little bit.
To clarify, I'm 100% fine with it.
I just want to feed the cow before they speak.
Yeah, I want to see the cow. I want to see the cow fed. I think we need to do this. I mean, we have been involved, our employees have been fighting this thing for, 7 or 8 months now. We have another 5 or 6, I mean, you talk about optimistic first of the year, I think it's probably going to be spring. So that's another 5 or 6 months. So we're giving this to them not for what they've already done, but what we expect them to do for the next 5 or 6 months. And I think they deserve it.
Yeah, and keep in mind, Joey and I aren't disagreeing.
Oh,
with
I
the
understand
71.5.
completely. The
Yes.
business community is hurting, but I
Right.
still think that leaves us $150,000 cushion that we can use for the business community or some food help or whatever.
Yeah, agreed. Okay, so I move that the town approve $71,500 of the town's allocated CARES Act funding to award hazard pay to the town full-time employees as presented.
Well, discussion.
I don't think
Have
it's
a
what
motion?
I'm
Any discussion?
I mean, I'll second it. honestly, but-
Before you second it, discussion,
I'll give you discussion right now.
I want to go with doubling that 71,500 right now. I want that to be 143,000, because I still think there's a cushion for business after that. I'm afraid that our employees this is a chance we're not going to have again, and I want to make sure it happens, like Mr. Shiro says.
And respectfully, my only argument would be, we have town employees who have been able to keep their jobs, and now they're getting a bonus. We have citizens who haven't been able to keep their jobs. And we have businesses that might not be able to continue to keep their doors open. And I'm not opposed to it if we have funding left, but give what we can now, which is 3 times what we gave the businesses, almost. 71.5 is 3 times what we gave the businesses. And then let's hold back, and if we have funding, to do it again.
Well, I made my amendment to the motion. I guess we can second it or knock it down one or the other.
Well, you actually have to accept it.
You have to accept the amendment.
I do agree with you. I think we still have some time. I certainly think if we have funds left at the end, that's where we should put them. Because we do have a tremendous staff who's done a great job for, many employees have been with us for decades. We have a super loyal, talented staff, and very highly respected in our community, which.
Yeah, and they put up with a lot of stuff, and
They
they did for several months, not just COVID related. Jason, since I made a motion, you modified it, what do we need to do at this point?
You can choose to accept it as a friendly amendment, or you can decline.
Mr. Vickers, I decline, thank you.
Say it to it.
Any other discussions?
I just think, again, we need to pass this full amount. We didn't give any cost of living increases, we didn't give any raises, cost of our budget. COVID could be with us another year or two. We might be able to do that for the next couple of years. I think we need to help our employees now while we can.
You're not out of time, though.
I'm sorry.
You're not out of time. You're still in November and December.
Well, wait, we are helping them, we're giving them 71,500, which is 3 times what we're giving our business community.
I'm going to give the business community more
I've only
right
got
now.
the hand to.
just then take it next month. Like, I don't understand why you're not doing something that's more measured.
There's a motion on the floor.
For once, I'm the conservative one, let it be noted.
And there's a second. No, any more discussion? Danielle, call the roll, please.
What's the motion again, so I know what I'm voting on?
As presented,
It's as presented,
As-
$71,500.
All right.
Mayor, do we have a second?
Yes.
I second.
Yeah.
Okay, thank you. Thank you, Debbie. Ms. Pence?
Yes.
Mr. Vickers?
Yes.
Mr. Aldermeyer?
No?
Mr. Shire?
No.
Mr. Lancaster? No. Mr. Sowers?
Yes.
That's a tie.
Ooh, it's first time.
Yes. It brings me into the picture. I'm gonna say yes. I think it's a hold on.
Hold on for
This is a historic moment, isn't it?
Not first.
That's what I get paid for, right?
That's what it should be.
That's good. All right, let's go to the next one. Town Electric Department.
Yes, sir. The mayor has requested that council not consider conducting our annual Christmas party due to the potential of COVID. And as such has requested that council consider utilizing the funds that would have been allocated to the party for a holiday bonus or gift certificate for the employees.
That's great.
We have about 100 people when you're talking about spouses and employees, and there's no really good place to have that with social distancing. You can eat with a mask on. So that's why I think we should forfeit it and give employees the money. That's my thoughts.
So you don't want action on this tonight, Steve?
No, sir, it's just what we wanted, your input. We'll include this on your November for consideration.
Okay, we'll move on to donation of property.
Yes, sir. The town has been approached by Blue Ridge Bank to consider their offer to donate parcel 42A11A-177. It is a parcel that includes property adjacent to Hawksbill Creek and our existing parking lot for Ruffner Plaza. It also includes a lower parking lot below where the Verizon cell tower is, as well as the parking lot that is adjacent to that cell tower facility. There is some power equipment within the upper parking lot that would have to be addressed. Currently, there is a lease of property for that from Verizon to Blue Ridge Bank. Options could include we could continue to maintain an arrangement similar to that with Verizon, or we could work with a surveyor to carve out a portion of that parking lot to attach it to the Verizon lot. We simply wanted to provide council with the opportunity to ask any questions that y'all might have, or give any indication as to how you would want the town to proceed. Either option one, which is simply the area adjacent to the creek, option two being the lower parking lot, option three being the upper parking lot, or any sort of combination of those three units of the parcel.
Steve, with the topography of the upper lot being rather steep in the back, are there any structural commitments that we're going to financially find ourselves in the short term?
In the short term, we don't believe that there is any instability in the parking lot. Long term, if we turn it into a public parking lot, we anticipate installing overhead lighting and resurfacing and striping in the future. There is a net benefit to establish an additional dedicated public parking area behind the post office. The lower parking lot, it is the signage would have to direct people around a steeper hill to get to it, but it could also be available for when we have downtown events.
Well, I was talking to Brian Plum about it, and of course, depends on which option we go with, but that property produces about $7,000 a year, wasn't it, Steve?
Yes, $6,000,
lease
yes, sir.
From Verizon or whoever owns the tower, so I mean, I know we'd lose a little taxes, but certainly we wouldn't lose that much. So, I mean, I know we're gonna look into it a little further later, but, you know, we can't have too much parking. That's good deal for us.
What I first see is that it looks like part of the greenway isn't town owned, so I sure like the idea of owning it.
Pretty close. It goes across the creek and kind of touches the
Yeah.
bank though. We probably ought to go over there and walk the site. It's a little confusing, but it's exactly what
There
we're
was,
talking
there was a piece on that side of the creek when we built the greenway, right in that section that the bank gave to us years ago. Now, probably John Bushy never got around to writing the deed.
Yeah, and please don't let the red line indicate, the red line was simply to go around the white line that is the actual parcel. The greenway is all owned by the town, and I believe all of the parking lot pavement is owned by the town. I think the majority of the area that would be dedicated to the town through this lot is open space where there are benches and other improvements. And I will offer that this whole discussion was generated because the town is working on a grant to place new trees, additional trees along the greenway to help reduce the temperature and increase the life of fish in the creek. And Blue Ridge Bank, without hesitation, said absolutely, there's no concern about the town getting a grant to put new trees on the bank property. And that resulted in them saying, well, we really don't need it. Are you interested? So again, we were very appreciative of all the cooperation we've received from Blue Ridge Bank on this.
I think the big parcel, we should accept. I'd have to really look at the rest of it. That parking lot,
Well, again, we weren't looking for any direction tonight. We simply wanted to inform you that this is an item for discussion, and we can continue to discuss it at the work session.
right now, it's pretty much used by the telephone company, isn't it?
Honestly, on the weekends, I'm just
during the week.
during the week.
Because
It
they
had-
don't have any parking facilities except that,
Mhm.
because this other lot up here at the top belongs to the bank.
Hey, Leroy, I know that, on Sunday morning, if the the post office parking lot is filled up, I have sometimes parked back in that spot
Yeah.
behind them, because it's a place to park.
Yeah.
And I assume that they won't tow my vehicle because it's Sunday morning, but,
Because we're members.
because I'm messing. That's okay. I agree, I think we should look at it and decide what's the best. Taking the land is a good idea for the rest of it.
Sale of town property.
Yes, sir, and this is a request. Our outgoing mayor has requested the ability to purchase the town-issued cell phone that he has had during his term. The town purchased the phone for $99 when we upgraded back in the beginning of January. Staff would propose that we seek that price or something less. The current value of the phone is estimated at around $700, so $100 is a good deal, and it covers the town's cost for what we spent on that. And again, staff is simply looking for either consensus or direction from council so that we can consider this in November.
So when we normally get rid of like computer equipment, those types of things, are we backing those things up in case we face future litigation where those things become an issue, having that data?
Well, the main data on the phone, we've never gone for text messaging. It's only the emails that are received on the phone, and that is housed in the server down in the basement. So we always do back up all of the emails that come in on the town email addresses.
Considering it's a town device, just as we do with any company, I think it should be backed up for litigation purposes.
Okay.
Is that something we could even,
It's a town property.
presumably could, but.
I believe all of the text messages are actually housed with the service provider, so that there is some record if there was a need to obtain that information, but I'm not, I would defer to Jason.
Can you look into that just to make sure we're protected there?
Certainly.
And then how do we normally dispose disposed of town property? Is it always a public auction?
Typically on the cell phones, we, when we're upgrading, we talk with our provider and we say we have so many of this type, so many of this type, and we're looking to transition to this type, this type, this type, and they will give us a lump sum trade-in value for the old phones.
And then you trade them in for new phones?
Yes,
So this would be an exception to what we normally do?
yes,
For policemen, when they leave, we let them have their service weapon for $100.
yes, sir.
So it's the same process.
I don't have a problem with selling it back for the same price that was purchased. I think that sounds fair.
Yeah, me too.
It was purchased for
I like the
Question
motion,
I
do we
have.
need a motion on this?
Okay, we're looking for one.
You want
Not
consensus?
tonight, we just wanted consensus, and we would include this on your November agenda if council agrees to that.
Steve, I just had one simple question. Like, is this gonna, like, there's no early termination issues or anything like that with it? Oh, man.
No, sir.
I'm fine.
No,
Something
and,
like that, then
and
at least know about it.
it's not uncommon that we add a phone here, or we add an MDD, mobile data terminal on a police cruiser as we transition to different items. So it's not unusual to have a few adds and deletes throughout the contract of our cell service.
Jason, you got anything?
No, sir. Thank you, Mayor.
Meeting adjourned.
No, it's